Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, let's talk about BILFS. What are BILFs, I hear you cry? Well, BILFs are books I'd like to finish. This is not a term I can claim to have invented myself. I saw it on Instagram the other day on one of those bookish accounts that basically just shares screenshots from other people's social media. So they shared a screenshot from I don't even know what platform it was, but a user called Luna S. Calloway, who had coined, maybe she didn't coin the term, but was using this term BILF. Books I'd like to finish. I'm going to extend it slightly and change it to books I'd like to finish someday. And for me, this is books that are kind of white whales. Books that you haven't finished for some reason, for whatever reason, but they are not true DNFs. They are not books that you think you are never going to finish. They're books that you want to go back to at some point and finish. Now, I've had a few of those over the years. There were two that particularly spring to mind. One of those was The Secret History by Donaldson, which is a book I really struggled with the first couple of times I tried to read it. I just couldn't get on with it at all. And then the final time, when actually I was reading it for a book club, I found it incredibly gripping and readable, and I literally couldn't put it down. So sometimes you just have to be in the right mood for a particular book. The other one for me is one I've read quite recently, which is Shogun by James Clavell. So that was a book I tried to read when I was in my late teens, just couldn't get on with it. I tried to listen to the audiobook later on in life when I was in my late 30s, I think, or maybe even my 40s, and again couldn't get on with it. And then I tried it one final time and really enjoyed it. So sometimes it's just not the right time for you and the book. So in this video, I have got a list of BILFs. I think I've got 7 of them, but with a stretch target that takes me to 10. And for me, these are, I'm doing this in a very particular way. So when I thought about what the books were that I'd like to finish someday, it really came down to books that I tried to read as a kid and hadn't got on with. And that kind of lingering doubt that maybe I just wasn't old enough for the book at the time. And that's why I didn't enjoy it, rather than there being the more kind of traditional mismatch between me and the book that you might get with a DNF, or you might get with a book that you kind of soft DNF and then go back to at a later date. So yeah, these are books that have kind of nagged away at me over the years, and I've decided I'm going to try and finish them. Now, when you see the list of books, you may be very surprised by many of them. Actually, there are some of these books will be books you may never have heard of, and B, some of them are books of a type that I've said on the channel before I'm not a fan of. So I don't know how well this project is going to go. Clearly, I'm not putting a time limit on this. I'm saying someday. I will probably try and read at least some of these books soon. But all of them, apart from the 3 that are in the stretch goal, all the rest of them are books, as I say, that I tried as a kid and just didn't manage to finish. So let me go through them with you. I'm going to do 2 digital ones, 3 digital ones first, that I don't have physical copies of, and then I'll get into the physical ones. So the first of those is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I had a lovely hardback edition of this that I got given, I forget who by, but by a relative, I think, or maybe I bought it for myself. I don't remember. Anyway, I can picture the actual book, and I tried to read it and I just found it too heavy going. I think the language was just too dated for me, perhaps, and so I never finished it. But it's exactly the kind of book I enjoy, a kind of silly adventure story. Don't hate me in the comments if you're a huge fan, but you know what I mean. It's got submarines, it's got giant squid. It sounds like it's going to be a really good time. So that is definitely one I want to try and crack. The next one is another classic, and it's a classic by an author who I've talked about on the channel, in that I tried to read one of his books and did not get on with it at all. But this is a book, again, that I tried as a kid, and when I tell you the title of the book, you may guess why I tried to read it. So the book is Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. So clearly, as someone called Oliver, it was the obvious Dickens book to try and read, but at the time I didn't get on with it. Again, I think it was probably just too heavy going. Now, I have subsequently read A Christmas Carol, and I really, really enjoyed that. But a couple of years ago, I tried Great Expectations, and I couldn't get on with it. I didn't enjoy it. I just found it too long-winded and a bit kind of confusing and muddy. So I'm going to give Dickens one more go. I'm going to try and read Oliver Twist at some point. I feel like everyone should read one Dickens book that isn't the easy one, A Christmas Carol, one other long one. So I'm going to give Oliver Twist another go as well. And then the final one that I don't have a physical copy of is one of the first of a few fantasy books on this list. So I've said on the channel before that I'm not a big fan of fantasy. I don't like all the world building that goes into it. I find it too much. But there are a few fantasy books that I really, really want to finish. I feel aggrieved by the fact that I haven't finished them. And I think partly this is because I was a really big fantasy fan when I was a kid. I read quite a lot of fantasy books, and a lot of my friends read fantasy books as well. And to be defeated by a book back then was a bigger deal for me, I guess, than to be defeated by a book now. So anyway, the first of the fantasy books that I want to try and finish is Lord Fowle's Bane by Stephen Donaldson. So this is the first in, I think there's 2 trilogies that kind of go back to back. The Thomas Covenant, Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, I think they're called. I tried to read this a number of times, probably 3 times over the years, and never managed to. I'm going to give it one last go, and hopefully I will get through it. But yeah, that one I don't have a physical copy of. Okay, let's do one definite fantasy book and then one kind of fantasy book. So the definite fantasy book is another book from a similar period of my life that, again, a load of my friends talked about and really, really enjoyed. I had a copy of it. I ended up, I think, and I mused on this in a book haul video, which may or may not go up before this video, so apologies for repeating myself. I can't remember if I had a copy of Magician. I'll tell you what the book is. It's Magician by Raymond Feist, which is a big fantasy novel. It's, I think, the first 1 or 2, depending on how you count it, because I think it was at some point published as 2 separate volumes. The first book in a saga called, I think, the Rift War Saga. So I had a copy of this, and I can't remember if I tried to read it and couldn't get on with it and swapped it with a friend for another book, or if there was another book that I'd finished and I did a swap and got this in return. But anyway, I definitely didn't finish it. So this is another very big fantasy book, longer than Lord Fowle's Bane, I think, which is probably about 450 pages or something. So yeah, another one that is on my list. Okay, next, this isn't like a classic fantasy book or classical fantasy book, I guess, but I think you would call it a fantasy book. And this is a book that I started reading as a kid. It felt, and I think quite a young kid as well. I think I was probably only about 10 or 11. And it felt like a challenge I was setting myself because it was such a big book. And I failed that challenge. I didn't manage to finish the book. But I do remember, whilst reading it, really, really enjoying it, to the extent that I named a hamster after one of the characters in this book. So the book is a type of book that became, I gave a brief flash, so maybe you saw it there, a type of book that became briefly popular because of the success of one particular book. And that particular book is one I've talked about on the channel and I didn't enjoy. That book is Watership Down by Richard Adams, which I just didn't get on with at all. The book that I remember enjoying but didn't finish as a kid is Duncton Wood by William Horwood, which is about moles rather than rabbits. And from what I remember, has more of a epic fantasy kind of a vibe to it. It is long. It is 730 odd pages long, and there is at least one sequel to it as well. I think there's 2 actually. I think there's Duncton Found and Duncton Quest or something like that. But anyway, a big fat book about moles that I'm determined to give at least one more chance to. Okay, moving on then, 2 very different books. Both, I guess you would call both of these thrillers, both books that I tried to read, again, as a kid and didn't manage to. So the first of those is very random. Actually, they're both very random. The first is Coma by Robin Cook. So a book that was a big deal partly because of the movie that was made based on it. It was directed by Michael Crichton, of all people, who for a while was a movie director. So came out in the 70s. I had this same edition back then, well, not in the 70s, at some point in the 80s. All I can remember about it is I expected it to be kind of really science fiction-y based on that cover, and I don't think it is. And I also remember that the opening of the book is about a woman who's, as I recall it, and I may be remembering completely wrongly, suffering some kind of gynecological emergency, which for a young boy reading the book maybe wasn't that appealing. So yes, this is another one for my BILFS list. And then the other one for my main list, before I get into the stretch target, is The Ninja by Eric van Lustbader. So initially I had the sequel to this, which is called The Miko. So I had a copy of that. I think I bought it on holiday or something like that from a second-hand bookshop, not realising it was the sequel. Then managed to get a copy of The Ninja, and I tried to read it and couldn't get into it. It's quite, from what I remember, quite kind of almost flowerily written. And I've subsequently tried to read it as an adult and didn't get on with it that time either. But I'm determined to give it another try. So I have picked up this paperback copy. All of the books I've shown are like the same editions as I had when I was a kid. So I was attracted to this book as a kid, clearly because it's about ninjas, but also because it boasts that it is stunning in its sensuality, which a boy at a certain time of my life was definitely, I think, probably something that appealed to me about this, the idea that it might be a little bit saucy. So The Ninja is the final of my... actually, it's not. There's one more which I forgot to talk about. So let me get to the final one. So the final one I will have a physical copy of, but it hasn't arrived yet. So this is a book I had when I was really young, I think less than 10. And it is very much the kind of book that you might expect a 10-year-old me to read and enjoy. But again, I couldn't get on with it. It is a book in the Action Man series of books. So Action Man, for those of you in the States and perhaps other parts of the world as well, Action Man was a toy I loved as a kid. So basically like a Barbie-sized action figure that you could change the clothes on and stuff like that, but all soldiers. And I had loads of action men with guns and vehicles. I think I had a tank. I definitely had a Jeep. I really, really liked Action Man. In the States, I know you had G.I. Joe, and I'm not sure. Maybe someone can clarify in the comments if G.I. Joe. When I think of G.I. Joe, I think of the kind of 3-inch-ish figures like that. But I don't know if G.I. Joe also came in the larger figures that you could change the outfits on. Anyway, I had an Action Man book that I remember. I can even remember which shop I bought it from in the town I grew up in, a particular newsagent's that had a nice spinner rack of paperbacks. And the book was called Operation Skydrop, and it was by an author called Mike Brogan. So I did try it. I do remember that G.I. Joe was a character in this book, as well as the main character who was called Action Man. So I'm guessing, I think this book was British, but I'm guessing they tried to sell them in the States as well. Anyway, I've got one of those ordered from eBay, but it just hasn't arrived yet. So looking forward to that. So that, I think, then is my core 7. I'm just trying to... I didn't properly, as you can probably tell, add up these books beforehand. No, I think that's actually 8. So I've got a core of 8, and then I've got a stretch target of more fantasy books. So this is a series of books where I definitely owned 1 or 2 of these books as a kid, and I didn't read them. And I think the reason is that I had this one, The Elfstones of Shannara, which again I think I picked up cheap at like a church book sale or something like that. And I don't think I ever had the first book in the trilogy, and therefore didn't read them. But I remember friends of mine reading these books and really, really enjoying them. And there's just something about the covers of these books that is appealing. So the 3 books are The Sword of Shannara, all of them by Terry Brooks. So The Sword of Shannara is the first one. The Elfstones of Shannara is the second one. And The Wishsong of Shannara is the third one. There's something just appealing about these books. And looking at them now, I think it's that they remind me of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon that was on when I was a kid that I really, really enjoyed. This cover in particular is just something about the way the characters are drawn that really reminds me of that show. So I think maybe that was part of the appeal. But yeah, I may try and read this trilogy as well as the other books I've talked about. Right, that is my list of BILFs. Let me know if there are any BILFs in your life, books that you tried, you know, maybe particularly when you were younger and couldn't get on with, but it's always nagged you that you never finished them. So one day you will. Yeah, let me know your BILFs in the comments. If you're a fellow booktuber, maybe you would like to do a BILFs video yourself. But I will leave things there and say, as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.